What up, folks? How's everybody doing out there?
One.
We're doing good because he's 1, 2, 3, and 4. But anyway, that's a different story. Folks, if you don't know Dominic Slice Teich, you should. Former fighter pilot and pilot instructor, or still pilot instructor, I should say.
That's right.
How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, God, yeah.
We're ready to fly into the danger zone.
Yeah. All day long, be afraid, let me tell you. So we were kind of chatting before, and we were talking about seriousness and trying to keep it loose.
Okay.
What are kind of some of your favorite things to do?
Let's see here. So I love to mountain bike. So we have some pretty sweet trails just about a block from here. I like backcountry powder skiing. That's pretty legit. Let's see what else. Water skiing's fun. Just like anything outdoors. I'll go to the gym if forced, but I don't like being inside a whole lot.
Yeah. So you're really talking about taking time for yourself.
Yeah, and I forgot. I love golf. That's not how I got my call sign, by the way.
Oh, good thing. I was gonna go with you like slice drink, the slice drink, right?
Wait, they're not even a sponsor, man.
Oh yeah. I don't even think they're around anymore.
Oh, Slice?
Yeah.
That's right, huh?
No.
All right.
Yeah.
So I used to work on an ambulance, and sometimes when things got really ugly or fugly, I used to crack a joke or kind of be silly. When you were in serious situations, to make that tension a little less, what were some of the crazy things you used to do?
Well, so I'm currently an F-16 instructor pilot. So I teach at the schoolhouse, which is so much fun because we get a lot. The majority of our students are new, right? It's the first time that they've turned on a fighter jet. Now, granted, they've gone through a ton of training to even get to us, so they're pretty amped once they get here. But they do bring. Sometimes they bring bad habits from the other airframes that are instructors that teach them prior to getting to us, right? So something that I like to do is kind of rib the younger students, especially when we're flying, if they're not using the right responses on the radio and stuff like that, because if you can imagine, if we're fighting a war and we're all on the same frequency and there's 100 fighter pilots, nobody wants 100 type A personalities on the same radio frequency trying to talk at the same time. So we're very specific about what we say, how you respond, and all that stuff. So I'll typically, when I'm airborne in the other jet, because we're single seat fighter pilots, so the student will be in his or her jet and I'll be in mine. And if they say something wrong, I will very sternly correct them. And then as I'm done keying the mic, I'm laughing in my jet because they have no idea that I'm getting on them for that thing. But in the debrief, I'll be all serious with them, and then I'll look at them, and then if I can feel that tension rising, then I'll go, dude, I'm just kidding with you. But in all seriousness, you need to do it this way. But I'm not mad at you. You're not, you're going to pass the ride. So I think my seriousness comes through to get the point across, but then there's got to be that piece where we kind of like humanize ourselves at the end of it. And just to kind of, lighten things up a little bit, because some things can get pretty tense, as you can imagine in the fast jet business.
Oh God, yeah.
What do you think? Because a fraction of people actually will ever fly in an F-16. What do you think the average person can learn from somebody, or lessons from being an F-16 pilot? Can the average person learn?
Yeah, so I think one of the I was talking to my dad a couple of months ago, and he brought up a good point. And it kind of shocked me initially, but I feel like I knew this subconsciously. But he's like, when you were a little kid, I did not think that you would be a fighter pilot, right? And I think that is very true with the majority of us, is that I've never been I've never met a student that fired up an F-16 and was just good at it right off the bat. There are some that are a little bit more inclined to be fighter pilots that maybe have some more natural ability and that kind of stuff. But I would say the majority of us as a collective group, any fighter pilot in any service, it's an incredibly difficult profession, right? It's fast, it's fast paced. There's only a short amount of time for you to learn information and succeed. But I think the biggest piece of that is that none of us really start out with, God didn't just like throw us onto the earth and be like, you're a fighter pilot, right? You learn that, like your brain learns that. You didn't, Chris, you weren't a like born ambulance, ER emergency response kind of guy, right? Like you learned a lot of that stuff. So I think the average person, what I always tell people is I'm like, I wasn't born to be a fighter pilot. I think it's a learned thing, and you can learn those processes, and you can practice, and you can apply yourself, and eventually succeed in that space. It's not fun a lot of times, but I would say that once you get good at it, it becomes a lot of fun, just because you're more like, the Major League Baseball player, playing in the World Series is standing in the batter's box. He's probably having an incredible amount of fun. Now, granted, he makes a lot of money, but I guarantee there were times where it was not fun as he was getting to that stage.
Oh yeah. No, and he's talking about like overcoming, right? Or uncomfortable, making it comfortable.
Right. Exactly.
I wanted to lead right back into it, as a fighter pilot, what are wins like, and how do you celebrate that? What's something where you're like, oh my gosh, I've got it. What is celebrating those wins of your students?
So I think the story that I typically tell young instructor pilots when they first start out, right? Because we teach this class. It's called Fundamentals of Instruction, right? So I'll teach this class, and what I'll tell the young instructors is, don't forget, because we are so critical when we debrief each other, right? Just to make sure that we all know what happened and we can get better. I also tell them, make sure that you debrief what they did correctly, because a lot of times, and sometimes, it's luck. So I think in order to celebrate like something that you did good, even the small things, there was a time. So we have a couple of F-16s that have a back seat in them, so that I can sit back there and make sure that, if a student's struggling, or maybe early on in the program, there'll be a time where we teach them how to land, or at least monitor what they're doing. Well, I was sitting in the back seat, and the student takes off, and it was like his second flight, and he's departing out to the airspace, and he's doing this climb profile that we don't do. It's pretty complex, and we don't teach it. And so I get back in the debrief, and I'm like, hey, you did this pretty legit climb profile. Man, they're teaching you guys some crazy stuff in the simulators. And the kid looks at me like deer in the headlights. And I was like, that was total luck, wasn't it? And he looks at, and I was like, dude, you're not going to bust the ride by telling me this, but like, that was total luck. And I was like, great job. You now know how to do a legit like mock climb profile. But that's not our standard profile that we fly to the airspace. So I think the big thing is in the debrief, especially as an instructor, when somebody's learning, there's so much new stuff that, it's important to go, hey, do you know that when we were dogfighting, you saw this sight picture? Did you know that that was correct? And then a lot of times they'll just stare at you, and you're like, you don't even remember what was happening, do you? It's like, well, at 9 Gs, just trying to stay alive in the jet, your brain's working on overtime.
So for me, that brings up that aha moment. Okay. As a teacher, coach, when you see that your student, your player gets that aha moment, what is that like for you, that feeling?
So as an instructor, it's a great feeling, right? Like that's what keeps you coming back to the plate. But I would say at the end of, so we typically use this construct. It's simple. We plan, execute, debrief. All right. So we'll put the plan together, maybe a day or two ahead of time. We'll do some pre-briefing to make sure the student knows what's going on. The day of, we'll execute the flight. And then in the debrief, I would say that that's probably one of the biggest things that's helped me in my business in my personal life is just how fighter pilots debrief. And it's a learned experience. Anybody can learn it. But there's a construct that you use to kind of figure out what the root cause was. But as we're debriefing, that aha moment sometimes requires you to just like turn around or slap the whiteboard or just like yell out loud, right? Maybe say a cuss word or something, like slam your drink on the table and then be like, dude, what did you do growing up? And they're like, well, I like to snowboard. And you're like, dude, I've snowboarded before. Okay, so now we're going through this turn, right? And you're on the front edge and like you relate it to something completely different. And then they go, okay, sweet. Remember that? All right, that's what we're doing right here in this mission, and that's what it kind of feels like. And then boom, yeah, you see the light bulb turn on and then that's the aha moment, right? And sometimes it's tough too because it's pretty rare, but every once in a while you'll get like a student that just does not have any shared common experiences, and then you'll just be like, all right, you tell me, you're a college graduate, you tell me what's going on here. And just sometimes they'll just be stream of consciousness explaining something and you'll be like, wait, what did you just say? You're like, okay, there's the chink in your armor, there's the root cause. You just had no idea what was going on in the first place, or you had a completely flawed understanding of what was going on.
How do you take the student from just the classroom environment,
Yep,
transition them into the F-16? Because we know you can be book smart, be
yeah,
be
Good thing this isn't being filmed in
110%,
3D.
yeah, really 100% and everything, but the minute they get into the setting, they just crumble.
yep.
How do you transition them?
Well, so by the time they get to the F-16, you have to have a 4-year degree in order to be an officer in the military. Whether that's the Navy, Marines, and Air Force, we have fighter jets. The Army doesn't. I don't think the Coast Guard does. If they do, they've stolen some. But you have to have a 4-year degree, right? And then you have to be able to walk and chew bubble gum to get into pilot training. And then you're going to go through pilot training screening. Then you're going to go through undergraduate pilot training, which is a 1,200 horsepower, 2-seat, fully aerobatic turboprop. Like it's a jet engine with a propeller on the front. That thing, it's a little go-kart. It's pretty legit. Wow. Then from there, you're going to step across the street. You're going to compete. And then you're going to get selected for the fighter track. Then you're going to go through a supersonic twin engine jet to learn the blocking and tackling there. And then from there, you're going to go through introduction to fighter fundamentals in the same jet, learning how to do dogfighting and stuff. And then they get to us. So by the time they get to us, the idea of like taking off and landing is not a cosmic, like mind-blowing experience. The jet is a little bit different. The aerodynamics are a little bit different in the F-16, but there's a lot of similarities that can be relatable. I would say because they do so few rides to get to the point where they solo the jet, where the students will struggle later on in the program is where they're blocking and tackling, if their fundamental base was maybe a little bit shaky early on, as you start layering on those new concepts, where you're doing air to air, you're dropping bombs, maybe you're rolling in and shooting a truck on the ground, and then you're coming off target and you're intercepting another Red Air fighter, and there's a lot going on. That's where the wheels on the bus will not go round and round, and they'll kind of fall apart pretty fast.
I wanted to ask because it leads into the A-type personalities that every single one probably are, because you gotta probably have a pretty big set of balls to fly an F-16. What?
Okay, Maverick.
I knew you were going to go there at some point, Goose.
I'm dead.
My question is, how do they handle criticism, and how do you get them through that?
You get such a vast array of personalities, and I would say that almost all across the board. Very rarely will you find a fighter pilot that isn't self-driven and self-critical and, wanting to do better. I'll say for me, I did not take criticism well early on in my career, mostly because I was number one at pretty much everything all the way up until getting into the F-16. And so for me, it was a tough pill to swallow, and it was more of a learned experience. And it was a learned experience because I was not doing what I should have done. Chris, sorry, you had something to say to that?
I have ideas that pop in my head and I have to do something so I remember it. I talk with my hands a lot.
Okay.
So
yeah.
I'm like, okay, I got a question on that.
Yeah.
I want to wait. I want him to finish. Sorry.
I would say that it's hit or miss. And there have been multiple times in my career where I was not being a good dude. I just wasn't doing the thing I should have been doing. When I was a young dude in the first fighter squadron that I was in, I pissed off some of the more senior instructor pilots. But then when I realized that, I ate my humble pie. I went back to those guys. And even though the relationship had been damaged, I said, hey, I was an idiot. I did this. I suck. I'm going to keep my mouth shut, and then at that point I was like, well, I have to take action and prove that I, my words are what they are. So, fixing the secure facility in the back and computers and cleaning up and just doing stuff to write my name and get back in the game. But there are times where that for me, it was a learned experience, and I learned it the hard way, right? With being kicked all the way to the curb and then having to go, okay, well, I actually suck and I need to be a better person.
It's a huge thing for all life.
Oh God, yeah, for all of us,
and all the way to F-16 pilots.
Yeah,
you all have to be, like you said, humble pie.
Yeah,
sometimes to find out that you don't know what you don't know yet.
Yeah,
go for what your idea is.
So, would you say that since the F-16 was kind of down here and everything else was up here, that was more of a challenge for you? Due to the fact why you are an instructor, an elite instructor with the F-16 now?
Now, do you mean that the F-16 was so far out of reach, or do you think that it was? Can you reframe that question?
Yeah, not a problem. At that point in time to now, the F-16 was so far out of reach, like you said,
okay,
that you wanted to make yourself that much better to the point to where you could surpass it and be able to teach students?
I think for me, at a young age, I've always liked aircraft. I've always liked aviation, pilots. It was just such a unique thing. There are no pilots in my family. My grandfather was in the Army Air Corps. He was a dentist, so he fought tooth decay. I had an uncle that was in Desert Storm in the Army, and he drove Humvees. And that was about it. I mean, I had a grandfather that was a Marine in peacetime, and he, and then I had some other random one-off family member, but like nobody was a pilot, and it was just so intriguing. And I think once I started flying when I was 16, so pretty young. And then by the time I was 18, I was a civilian flight instructor. So I was flying through college and teaching people how to fly. I just loved it. And I was also at an airfield where F-16s, there was a guard base, and the guard F-16s were landing. So right next to me on the runway. So I think for me, it was just kind of it was a thing that I thought maybe was reachable, but I actually applied to an airline as well as the Air Force at the same time. And I got picked up by the Air Force. So it was one thing after another. I didn't really start out to answer your question. I didn't really start out with going, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. I think a lot of people maybe have aspirations to do that, but many of those very tough things in life, you don't really have, like, very rarely are you going to go A to B straight line. You're going to zig and zag your way to that goal. And sometimes when you zig, you may find out that you need to zag, and then you're now off on a different trail, right? And it shoots you into another trail, and you're like, wow, I didn't even know this existed. And now you're maybe doing something that's even higher than you thought you could do. I actually wanted to be a test pilot and an astronaut, but then when I realized how dull and boring it would be to pilot a rocket, like, I was like, I don't want to do that.
You want that magic carpet ride.
Yeah.
No, you just sit back and like strap in.
But in an F-16, you got that magic carpet ride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say your most memorable moment is right now then?
In the fighter world,
Yeah.
fighter jet world.
Or if you want to go personal instead or something else, please do. I mean, what would
Yeah,
you
I mean, I think from the most personal thing that was the worst and best thing that ever happened to me, because everybody has your own experiences, right? Like my first deployment, we got shelled 56 times, and I was young. I had a long distance relationship. I was newly married. There was a bunch of challenges there, but I think the the culmination of everything kind of came together when I owned a couple of businesses, about 6 years ago, and I had a pretty big mental crash, because if you run out of gas in a fighter jet, you flame out, right? Like the flame that lights your motor goes out, and the F-16 glides. Our glide ratio is very similar to the space shuttle, so it's a pretty quick ride down. Um, and I had a mental crash that was the worst experience of my life. I mean, your brain does crazy stuff, whether it's, PTSD, and you don't have to be in the military deployed. You don't have to be shot at. I mean, you could be in a really bad car accident, right?
Mhm.
Right. So, and you have these things, this 90-second loop in your brain that just plays this terrible movie over and over and over. Right. So I end up in this really dark place, and through counseling and all that kind of stuff, I kind of figure out, like, okay, I need some nuts and bolts over here. I need this to be tweaked, and, kind of piece your mind back together. But from there, that's where my passive real estate investing company that I own started to take off. That's where, I started another business, which I have since stopped because it was all about money and there wasn't a whole lot of purpose other than the money. And then, now Single Seat Mindset is this new company, and we give all the money to a children's cancer nonprofit. We write books. We have an online program called The Competent Wingman. And it's really started to grow, right? So I've been working on it for about 2.5 years. And, after publishing the second volume of Single Seat Wisdom, it's pretty incredible to see where that project is going, and the purpose that it gives. But a lot of that came from that huge mental crash. And if you guys looked at me back then, and even now, I don't know if you would have been able to tell, because you would go, oh, he's successful. He's a fighter pilot. He has businesses. He has a pretty wife. Like, he has a nice house. Like, he's got it all put together, right? And then you don't one day.
90% of the people you don't ever know.
And
Yeah.
we've all, this world's gone through, let's just say it's hell
Yeah.
for the past couple of years.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of people that need to reach out to you, because there's a lot of things you can offer them that they might still be dropped in that darkness, and they need something to help get them out. I know that that's what you provide, a lot of that.
Oh God.
So how do they get a hold of you? How do they find your book? How do they get a hold of you? How do they get in contact with you?
Yep, at singleseatmindset.com.
Yep.
So single seat, because we're single seat fighter pilots. And mindset's huge, right? And that's what I learned 5 or 6 years ago. I have to go back. I think it's more like 6 years now, but it's your mindset. Your mind will screw you up so bad that, like, your whole physiology, right? Like, COVID, like you were saying, it's a mind-numbing experience, right? Because that's what it did to everybody. And now everybody still has, it's all pent up in their physiology, in their mind, their body. Like, they're spiritually void. Like, they're just dying inside.
Let me ask you this, because I think this leads a lot into what you offer, but how do you attribute, like, what can go wrong in an F-16? Like, you can plan for all the things that go right.
Yeah.
But it's what goes wrong that you're like, hey, how do you handle that? And I'm sure that attributes right over to where you're helping people and coaching them.
Yeah.
And you talk about some of the really scariest moments in an F-16, and
Sure.
how you got out of them, and then how you can really feel that can help other people, and how do you handle that pressure?
Yeah. So I think just knowing, because I get asked this question a lot, when when you're stepping out on a combat mission, are you afraid of, like, dying? And I don't think that way. And I think that our military programs and our training is so intense, and it's so in depth, that your brain just gets trained to go, no, I'm going to go take off, and I'm going to fly this mission. and then I'm going to come back home and we're going to win. So I think it's a mindset thing, but as you're stepping out the door, you have your plan that you're going to go execute. And then there's a couple of different layers to that, right? So experience will definitely, I call it old man strength. My old man strength, because of my experience and what I've seen, specifically the mistakes that I've made, I just know not to do those. So the new guy may not have that experience of just what not to do. So that's fine. So realize you're going to make those mistakes. And then some of the best fighter pilots are actually the ones that, they'll plan, and then as they're briefing their plan, they'll go through like how they want the mission to go. It's very simple. Keep it simple, stupid. It's very executable, but then they get into the contingencies. Hey, what happens if this happens? What can we do over here? Hey, if we're supposed to take off with 4 aircraft, we only have 3. How do we handle that? What changes? Does it change our shot doctrine? Are we gonna be able to bomb the targets? What are we doing on the way home, on the egress? What are the expectations? So briefing those different contingencies, but then just realizing that if you wake up in the morning, just any day, and you want the day, you just want peace and quiet and tranquility, you're setting yourself up for failure, because this is the world, right? But if you start out the day going, hey, for 5 minutes, spend 5 minutes in silence in the morning, pray, meditate, do whatever you need to do, get your mindset right. If you enter the day going, there's going to be problems today, and I'll just take care of them as they roll through. But this is my intention today. I've started out on the right foot. I've started out balanced, and I've got my mind straight. And as I move in the day, I go, oh, sweet. Yeah, that's really cool. I just found out that I got a big hole in my roof, and it ruined like a quarter of my entire roof. It's like real neat. And then my wife calls me in the garage door. It breaks. And so, there's another $1,000 right there, right? And you just know that happens. And you go, in the grand scheme of things, does it really matter, right? And so I think that's kind of what I've learned as a fighter pilot is, as you go into the mission, right? We're always talking about near rocks and far rocks. If you're flying at 300 feet and 500 to 650 miles an hour, things kind of move fast, and you go, okay, what's the near rock that's going to kill me? But then after I've got that under control, what's the far rocks, right? What's the next thing coming up? And that kind of gets you out in front of the jet, but also keeps you present here, right? Because you can't be like, oh, there's a mountain over there, and then bam, you get hit by a tree that's a few hundred feet away. So I think those are some of the things that a lot of this program, the Competent Wingman, these books, they were designed for fighter pilots, and I started getting feedback from, there's a guy here in Phoenix. He owns 4,000 apartment units. He's like, this is very applicable to business owners. I had a VP of insurance talk to me today. He's buying them for his team. These books, right? These programs. It's pretty cool to see that these decision-making skills at 800 plus miles an hour, other people can learn those, and they're very applicable to peak performing professions, right? And you can be a doctor, attorney, lawyer, accountant, just kind of learning how a fighter pilot thinks, because we had to learn it too. And you can apply that. There's simple little things that kind of tweak your plan as you go throughout your day.
It's something that I like to say, and it's kind of the way that you're talking is, how do you take Mach 97? I know I'm exaggerating, but Mach 97, and be able to slow it down to where your mind can compute it and be able to react at any given time. Am I correct?
Yeah, because as humans, you can do one thing at a time, right?
Exactly. Well,
and so
men can. Allegedly, women can do. No, I'm just kidding. My wife's excuse me for that one.
Well, so that's an important piece, is that a lot of times in a debrief, when we're looking at something, it's the student sitting across from the table. It's like, dude, you just put the wrong thing in the wrong order, right? You needed to be, you were changing a radio frequency, dude, and you were 100 feet from the ground getting ready to land. And our touchdown speed's like 200 miles an hour. Like, we're coming in, we slowed down to 200 miles an hour. So like, dude, you put the horse before the cart. Like, let's control the aircraft first. Let's focus on landing. All right. Then we'll switch radios or go around. Right. So we need to just change the decision-making process. And we call it call it a cross check, right? Where you have a scan pattern, call it misprioritization. You just misprioritize what you were supposed to be doing at this point in time. And maybe you need to see the ride again. But in life, it's the same thing, right? It's what were you doing at the time, right? Like, were you searching on Instagram, or I don't even know what it's called. You scrolling through Instagram, right? And dude, you should have been maybe working and doing this over here through your day. And at the end of the day, you didn't get anywhere. Well, you just misprioritized your whole day because you didn't start out with the right intentionality.
Gosh, that's such a huge part of life is misprioritizing. That's big.
That's huge.
Man.
We all do it. I mean, let's just be honest with that.
That's gotta be one of the biggest, hardest things for people.
Oh yeah.
Is to deal with that. Yeah,
definitely.
And I think that brings up a good point, is when I had my mental crash, as I crawled out of that, I started going to bed a little bit earlier, which prevented me from drinking that extra beer, eating that bag of chips, binge watching Netflix. And then I got up, 5 to 10 to 15 minutes earlier every morning. And it got to the point where I was getting up at 3:45 to 4 a.m. to get up before my kids so I could actually keep my business running before I went into work. So I knew I could choose kind of when I could go to bed. I could kind of settle the house down, and that allowed me to get up in the morning. It allowed me to like kind of focus and figure out, what the hell am I doing today? Like, what is on my list? What do I think needs to be on my list? And then out of the 10 things on my list, if I just did one of them, what is that one thing? What's that big domino that I can knock over? And that's not an original thought. This is through, reading books and listening to podcasts like this. But like, what is the one thing I could do? And then if I had option 2 and 3, what are those things? All right. And then I start my day with that intentionality, because I tell a lot of the young guys, dude, if you don't walk into work knowing what you want to do with your day and having an intentionality to your day, the first person that you meet is going to give you their agenda. And then, dude, there goes your whole day. You want to talk about misprioritizing stuff? Like, somebody's just going to hand you their intention.
That's right.
Oh God. Yeah.
Man.
Wow.
Let's stay on for the next 10 hours and just learn everything.
Oh God.
That we need to learn right now. Or they need to go visit.
Yes.
There's a lot of gold that everybody can learn.
Oh yeah.
So thank you for being on the show.
Single Seat Mindset.com.
Single Seat Mindset, and I gotta get a book.
Yeah.
I gotta get a book.
Absolutely.
So I'll be ordering right away.
Oh God.
I appreciate you. You've been great, and it's been a lot of fun having you on.
Slice.
Thanks, Jens.
Thank you, sir. We greatly appreciate it. From all of us here at What Up with Rob and Chris, have a great day and a better tomorrow. What up, folks?